Natal astrology using essential dignities. That is the topic of this video. We're going to break down with some chart examples, particularly one chart. That is the chart of Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. And we're going to break down his chart to examine how to use essential dignities in astrology and just add some layers to your reading practice, to how you read charts. And I hope that this video can help you maybe add additional components to how you examine the house topics and the planets and their relationships to each other. And so welcome here. My name is S.J. Anderson. I'm a consulting astrologer, YouTuber. I've got love participating in the conversation, the astrological conversation. You can find my channel, S.J. Anderson 144. You can find me on Twitter, S.J. Anderson 144. And so welcome here. And I want to thank Nadiya Shah for having me on her channel, inviting me to produce a video for her channel. I'm very honored. So let's start out. This is this first slide. And in this presentation, we're going to look at a PowerPoint, a slide presentation I made as the basis to provide those visuals. Always helps when you're studying and learning astrology to have visuals and engage directly with those visuals. So first slide here, purpose of this talk. It's to learn about using essential dignities, using the nativity of Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. And while transits are powerful, very, very powerful. In fact, I use transits as an essential tool to delineate the natal chart because we see when transits activate sectors of the chart, we compare the facts that have unfolded in a life during those activations to understand more deeply the natal promise. In this talk, I am not going to look at transits at all. We're going to remove that from the conversation because we don't need to in order to explore this major theme and the major point here, which is the use of essential dignities to examine the natal promise and look at what happens in the life, and then look at the chart and then the dignity scheme and how that can inform what we're witnessing in the unfoldment of an individual. So the last thing is here, we will focus on these recent revelations made by Harry in interviews regarding his newly published memoir, Spare. So this was a big thing for Harry. He was all over the news. He publishes this memoir and makes a lot of disclosures. It's one thing I learned early from my teachers. They were suggesting if you want to get good at natal astrology, pick up a person you're interested in's biography or autobiography, and then just go through their life with your ephemerides, with your astrology software, and look at what's happening as you're reading the book about their life, and then compare the astrology that's unfolding in their life, given whatever techniques you're using for timing. And so it's great when we see someone disclosing more about themselves because we can understand more deeply the life that they're living. In readings, this happens often with clients. I really love to let clients share with me about their lives because I always tell them the chart then pops into 3 or 4D, 5D. When you get more information about someone, you can see how the symbols embedded in the nativity are specifically applicable to their life. And so it's great that he was able to publish this memoir for astrologers who are using his chart as an example. Next slide is the ISAR ethic rule. Whenever I talk about things that relate to ethics, I like to bring these in right away so we can clarify what the ethics are. And this would be the ISAR ethics rule. A9, responsibility to the public. A, charts of public figures. Interpretation of the charts of public figures are confined to areas that are considered public domain because the person's achievements or notoriety has already been revealed in various media. While interpreting charts of public figures, astrologers refrain from making slanderous comments. And so nothing I talk about in here is going to be not slanderous at all. In fact, I admire Harry for the candor and the directness of his recent media tour around the publication of his book. I was very impressed with what I had seen. More so, I hadn't really followed him. And then I saw him on Twitter, a lot of clips of these interviews, and he was quite impressive. And that's the thing here. We're sticking just to the recent media tour and the disclosures made by him. And that's all the facts we're going to discuss. Known disclosed facts in the public domain by him, made by him. And so I think we're very good here for purposes of this ethics rule. There's no rumors, there's no scandalous, slander or anything that we'll be doing here. But it's good to check in with this rule. Anytime you're going to publish writing about a public figure, make sure you're adhering here and communicating clearly what the rule is to the audience. Okay. So next slide, I want to start here. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, British military officer. He's most famous for, and this is my conclusion, Princess Diana's son, right? He comes into the limelight very early as the son of Princess Di. He's the brother of Prince William. And that was his early life. Obviously, the death of Princess Diana was a huge part of Prince Harry's story in the, as he's been in the limelight. And then he came back here with the marriage of Meghan Markle. And that was very much in the front and center of the media because she, of course, was a Hollywood actress. And Meghan Markle was famous in her own right. And so it's kind of a celebrity marriage that had a British royal marrying an American, a biracial American, and all of the kind of just the media focus that was placed on them as a couple. So he's known for his marriage to Meghan Markle. And then he's become more prominent here recently in the rift in the royal family. They were asked to leave or left the royal family. I'm not sure the exact details on it. I guess relieved of his royal duties, something like this, and then moved to America and now has his kind of own life as the Duke of Sussex. So this rift is also what he's known for. So we're going to keep those larger themes in mind as we delineate here and as we delineate this nativity. Next slide here. Here's the nativity. We have to note that it's a Radhan rating A-rated time. And when you look at the explanation here on astro.com, I don't think I included it, unfortunately, here, but basically there's some reliance on this time. It was reported by people very close to the situation that this time was the time he was born, quoted in the media or biographies or something. So there's some level of reliability with this. It's just not a birth record in hand. We don't have that. And that would be what would raise this up to AA. But I think the A-rated time is good enough to at least apply some techniques to. I find it to be very accurate, given just what I've looked at here. It seems like this is a chart that's working very, very well. 15 September 1984, 4:20 p.m. in Paddington, England is how you can punch up the nativity of Prince Harry. And so let's keep going here. I'm going to take a look at just some high-level features of this nativity using the major form of rulership that we most often think of when we think about rulership when we delineate natal charts, and that's what's called domicile rulership, or the major house rule or something like this. And in this technique, each of the 7 traditional planets get assigned to the 12 signs. 5 of those planets get assigned to 2 signs. The sun and moon get assigned to 1 sign. And then you have the scheme of domicile rulership. And we learn this very early in our training. And often people just stick to this form of rulership as the major way to look at a house topic and then what topics that house topic may blend with. Tied specifically to the house location of the domicile lord of that house topic. And we kind of stop there. It's a very robust technique. And so it's very useful to do that technique. And I'm going to do that here in Harry's chart, just to kind of break down and get you used to the basic elements here, which is you look at the house, you look at the rulers of that house. If you're using the whole sign house system, it would be the rulers of the sign that comprises the full 30 degrees of that house division. If you're using quadrant houses, it would be the ruling planets of the house cusps sign. And I'm not going to break that down too much further, but basically houses have rulers dependent on the sign that we assign to that house. So let's just go here in Harry's chart. Right away, a major theme, strong women show up in his chart because Venus is domiciled in Libra in the strong 10th house. The ruling planet of Libra by domicile is Venus. Venus is placed in Libra in his chart. The significations of Venus include the idea of women. And so powerful women in the house of prominence is directly related to Harry's life. If you want to bring in the moon as the planet of women as well, you can see the moon is in Taurus, and the ruling planet of Taurus is Venus. So the moon has, again, this very strong ruling planet. Of course, there's exaltation rulership. The moon is in the sign of its exaltation. So he's got a theme of strong women. We've seen that in his life. His mother was one of the most powerful, probably still considered the most powerful media force in the world. I was very young when Princess Diana was living, but I remember just how much of a tour de force she was in terms of everybody loved Di. I mean, my family worshipped her, some members of my family. She was beloved by everyone. And that's that Venus in Libra in the 10th. Some people delineate the 10th house as the topic of mother too. And so you would have, in that case, Venus is Princess Di in the chart, and it's such a powerful Venus. Let's keep going. So you can see just by domicile rulership, we're learning a lot now about Harry. Saturn on his midheaven, 5 degrees away from the midheaven, shows that there's a difficult relationship with the royals. And the reason why I say the royals, I'm using Saturn in this case to indicate the royal family. Saturn can be the personages of great ranks in a society, but particularly those with the embedded with old power structures. And the royal family would be certainly that. I mean, it's an institution that has hundreds and hundreds of years, if not longer, history as being embedded in the social fabric. And so this would be Saturn. And Saturn right on his midheaven just shows here that you would have Saturnine themes coming through. That is to say, he's a member of the royal family. Saturn is, in this chart, ruled by Mars. And Mars is in the 12th house. And so right away we have the idea, if we want to think about his relationship to the royal family, comes now into the 12th house of enemies and obstacles. And so right embedded here is that there's some kind of restriction maybe to his career around that family, that they maybe kept him hemmed in, and that it's the source of obstacles and enemies, given the domicile lord of Scorpio, the ruler of that Saturn midheaven conjunction, is in the 12th. And so it's very much describing this part of his life, which is the rift in the royal family. Mars also, not only is it the ruler of the 12th, of the 11th house and Scorpio and the Saturn midheaven conjunction, and these are whole sign houses, Mars also rules his 4th house of family lineage, family heritage, parents, and grandparents. And so that those obstacles, challenges, and difficulties in his life, those 12th house themes, relate to both the royal family in terms of them being signified by Saturn, but also the royal family being signified by Mars, because Mars is the domicile lord of his 4th in the 12th. Okay, so just by domicile rulership, we're getting a strong sense that this chart works quite well for Harry. Let's keep going. His 3rd house of siblings is ruled by Jupiter, because the 3rd house is comprised of the sign Pisces, that 3rd whole sign house. And Jupiter is fallen in Capricorn in his 1st house. And what it tells us is that there's a selfhood, indelible imprint on Harry's selfhood by his brother William. And of course they would have this indelible connection. They're brothers, but they went through that hardship together as young men, or as boys, I should say. And so you can see that it's very much, he's tied to William here, but it's Jupiter fallen. And I think this describes the kind of weight of what these boys went through, losing their mom in their, right as they're in that process of maturity. And that is that Jupiter in Capricorn, the grief that comes with Capricorn that's implied by the sign of Capricorn, but the idea that him and his brother had that shared grief together. The other thing that this would show is that the rift with William, that Harry's been processing. Part of these interviews with Spare was him describing him and his brother's rift over the last few years related to his marriage to Meghan Markle and his kind of separation from his royal duties. But that would also be explained here, that when we look at the condition of the 3rd house ruler, the condition of Jupiter in Capricorn is not very good. And so it would just imply there'd be times in his life where he would struggle with his sibling, sibling and relatives. Difficult relationship with the relatives that impacts him personally is the delineation here. You might also consider that the 3rd house is relatives of all kinds. Camilla, his stepmother, may be found and represented in this chart by Jupiter, because it's the ruler of the 3rd house by domicile, or by Saturn, which is the planet of step-parents. And that Saturn on his MC, ruled by Mars in the 12th, is also maybe expressing this difficulty with his relatives in general, which could include Camilla, which is a major part of Harry's story. But it's William as I think a primary delineation here, 3rd house lord fallen. And these are just a few ideas using domicile rulership. to understand the basic technique here of how you look at house topics, you examine the domicile lord, its condition, and what house it's placed in to begin telling the story of the life and understanding the topics of the life, okay? And next layer of this is that I want to just summarize. If we just look at the domicile rulership of Prince Harry's chart, it's this first column. Strong Venus in the 10th. He's known for powerful women in his life. And the children, right, of those women. So Princess Di's children, and then him and Meghan Markle, they're both mothers, Di and Meghan Markle. That could be a 10th house theme, but certainly its prominence and reputation through these powerful women, and that's his life through his mom. And then Meghan Markle has this kind of prominence. Like I said, Hollywood star before she met him and before they were married. And that's his Venus with that plus next to it, Venus and domicile. And then the other feature of his nativity, he's got this strong Mercury in his ninth house, ruling his ninth house and his sixth house. And he's known now for publishing, right? He's written about healing. He's written about his life and disclosed through the publishing process a lot of his life. And that would be his very powerful Mercury in the ninth house of publishing, the planet of writing. So you can just see here the basics of using domicile rulership, how it tells us quite a lot. All right. Now I'm going to pivot here in this talk. I want to come to an article by Robert Hand, my favorite living astrologer. I think he's, he deserves everything that, all the laudits and plaudits that we can give him, because he's an amazing astrologer. He was writing an series of articles in the early aughts for this site called Star IQ. And there was a series he did in March 2001 on George Bush, a series of articles. You can find these on astro.com. But I want to come to his article about Bush, and he has this section called Back to Bush and Triplicities, where Robert Hand uses these other dignities to break down Bush's chart and understand it more deeply. Here's a quote: triplicity rulership is not as potent as rulership by sign and exaltation, but it is potent. So I want to give you that background from Robert Hand. Here's another quote when he's using Bush's nativity. He says, he's looking at Bush's midheaven, which is in Aries, and he says that the domicile ruler is Mars. The exaltation ruler is the sun, but since it's daytime, the sun is also the triplicity lord. And so when we look at that midheaven in Aries, we actually look at the sun as maybe the most powerful planet, because it's doubly ruled by Aries. The midheaven is doubly ruled by this powerful sun, by both triplicity and exaltation. And so maybe it has a huge connection to the themes of the midheaven and the themes of that house. And so that's the fundamental deepening of this technique that I'm offering in this video. Look to exaltation lords, look to triplicity lords, and look to Egyptian term lords to give us a different and deepening set of layers for each of the topics of the houses, the 12 houses. I'm going to give you a few more quotes here from the ancient texts to just show you that this was how the astrology was done all the way back when it was developed. It was not just looking at the domicile lord. These astrologers looked at all of the forms of rulership. So here's Rhetorius the Egyptian. This is from the Holden translation, page 33. He says, and examine the rulers of the triplicity of the light, of the sect, and of the ascendant, and their dispositors, and the rulers of the terms of the sun and the moon. This is for a specific technique, looking at the sect light and the ascendant and trying to get a sense of the nativity. But still, you can see that there's the use of rulership for that goes beyond simply domicile rulership. Now we come to Claudius Ptolemy, book 3 of the Tetrabiblos. This is going to be page 8, and this is the translation from Project Hindsight by Robert Schmidt, edited by Robert Hand. And he says here, on the whole, the manner of rulership is contemplated in these 5 ways: by trigon, by domicile, by exaltation, and by bound or term, and by phase and configuration. And whenever the place in question has one or more, or even all of these in relation to the star that is about to rule. That's a little bit of a confusing sentence, but the point is here he's laying it out. Here are the forms of rulership. Look at the relations, effectively, is how I read that. One more quote. Vettius Fallon's The Anthology, Book 2, Part 1. He talks in this case about Zeus trine Eris, which is just Jupiter-Mars trine. And he says, when one of them has rulership and the other has mastery, signifies men who are great and commanding and sovereign, especially in their own zodion or trigons or degrees, or upon the profitable zodiac, or when they have exchanged dwelling places or boundaries, especially when they have authority or rulership over the lot. So did you see what he did there? He's saying, look at the signs, the trigons, which is the triplicity rulership. Look at the boundaries or Egyptian terms, and look how they're exchanging vis-a-vis rulership. And, so again, this is just a short, high-level kind of snippet from each of these writers. There would actually be for each of these a deeper analysis of the text, because they're talking about specific contexts, and the way they're phrasing these lists, we could parse it and try to make distinctions and stuff. But I'm just extracting a high-level point here, which is they're using all forms of rulership in their analysis. Okay, I think that's clear. Exactly how they're using it, that's a whole separate conversation. But to come back to our purposes and to the hand article, what I'm doing is just trying to say here that you can look at, according to traditional astrology, look at the triplicity rulers and the exaltation rulers and what houses they're in to get information about the topics you're examining. So you look at the cusp or the sign comprising the whole sign house. Where are these other rulers? Where are they placed in the nativity? It will tell you more information about that house topic. Okay, and just as this article that Hand writes about George Bush, that's what he's delineating. He's saying it's the sun in the 12th house in Cancer. That sun has a huge component for Bush's career, and a lot of politicians have 12th house placements. Being in politics is all about enemies and defending yourself against enemies. So, okay, let me keep going here. So I want to shift back to Harry's nativity, and now we're going to apply these other forms of rulership and look at the layers that they can add with 3 topics in Harry's life that. 2 of which are disclosed in these recent revelations with the publishing of his autobiography, or his memoir. Memoir, I guess. First, I just want to come out, BBC article, Prince Harry cried. He says he cried once after Prince Diana's death. So actually all 3 are related to these recent disclosures. So it's grief, right? He's dealt with grief. And this has been a huge theme of Harry's life, how to process the death of his mom, not being able to, taking tools or help figuring out how to process his grief. If we come back in to his chart, so Saturn is the triplicity lord and the exaltation lord of Libra. So remember, we come back to this conversation, his 10th whole sign house of maybe either mother or the prominence, his reputation. He's known for strong women, and his mom was a strong woman, right? That's the Venus in Libra. However, Saturn has great dominion over Libra in Harry's chart, more so than maybe Venus. Daytime, Saturn is the triplicity lord, the day triplicity lord of Libra. Saturn is the exaltation lord of Libra. So to understand his relationship to this strong woman and his mom, you have to now come back to Saturn. Saturn on his midheaven. He's known for this grief process he went through. We all witnessed it. The whole world saw it. He grieved in public the death of his mom. And that's how this Saturn is directly impinging on the analysis of his relationship to his mom. And what do I have here? The exaltation lord of Libra is infused. So Saturn as the triplicity lord and exaltation lord infuses this difficult Saturn-Mars-Jupiter relationship into the story of strong women in his life. And so now we're back to being known for the difficulties around the family and the grief, the obstacles in 12th house, challenges of that Mars, and then that fallen Jupiter ruling that Mars. All of these difficult symbols are brought back in, all right? And it explains why both powerful women are brought into his life, but that those women then are associated with great challenge for Harry in the sense of his mother passing and the grief, but then in the sense of Meghan Markle, right? His decision to marry her and their marriage brought a lot of challenge to him. There was a reaction from his family, from the whole country. Certain sectors of the UK were really, I guess, incensed by it. I'm not sure I understand that, and I don't want to, I'm an American, I don't understand the full nuances, but, to me, why don't we just celebrate when people are in love? That's my theory, and let them live in love. But you can see how these difficulties come back in. All right, let's go to the next slide. And so just to come back, the key is looking at, it's the exaltation and trigon rulership is how we get brought back into these other parts of the chart. I believe you really can't fully understand Di or Meghan Markle without these other forms of rulership. It actually provides the full context and the full story. All right, next topic. Prince Harry tells Anderson Cooper, this is from the 60 Minutes Twitter feed, he's used psychedelics to cope with grief. So he made that disclosure, and that's pretty cool. I think cutting edge psychedelic use to try to process the inner life, it's kind of the best way to use them. I'm not advocating their use unless you're around professionals or people that know what they're doing, just to be clear. So don't want to get confusion out there. So let's come back to the chart. The sixth house of health is comprised of the sign Gemini, the sixth whole sign house of health. And so in this case, to understand his health, well, right away we know Gemini comprises that whole sign house. Gemini is a sign of the mind. We might think, is there mental stuff going on? Is it more of an internal kind of mental battle with Harry? Okay, cool. But the domicile lord is Mercury, powerful in the ninth. That explains why he's writing in his memoir and disclosing so much about his health, I think. The strong domicile lord in the ninth house of publishing, the planet of writing, he would write about the health process and publish about his health process. But to understand further and deepen that analysis, we would say, well, the trigon lord of Gemini, there is no exaltation lord of Gemini, the trigon lord of Gemini is Saturn on the midheaven, near his MC. Saturn is the planet of grief. He's writing about grief as it impacts the health. So there's, he's grieving his mom, trying to process his childhood, his family of origin issues, the grief that's associated with that. And so it's mental health and grief, the two main themes that he disclosed. And you need Saturn as the trigon lord of Gemini to process that and understand that. The trigon lord, by the way, Mercury in the ninth is also mysticism and religion. And that's, I think, why these psychedelics, these mystical tools that are maybe non-traditional, that all comes into the ninth house as well. So the trigon lord Saturn near his midheaven. So it's not only that Saturn is the trigon lord, but it's on the midheaven, which means that he's making public disclosures about his grief and the health issue that his grieving process became for him. And so that only comes in, the nature of the health issue being grief-oriented and the nature of it being so public, only comes in if we allow the trigon lord of the sixth house sign to be brought into the analysis. So there you go. Okay, it's just beautiful. Let me see, there's one more slide here. So Saturn on the MC is in the Egyptian term of Mercury. And you can see it here in Solar Fire, gives this very nice chart. You just go to Saturn. It is in a Mercury's Egyptian term, which means that to understand his grief and this prominence of grief in his life, there's a component of that then is brought back into the publishing. So it's not just that the sixth house is ruled by Mercury and Saturn, it's that Saturn itself is ruled by Egyptian term by Mercury. And it says here that public grief is processed through these religious practices, ninth house, which can be medicinal psychedelics, and with writing and memoir. So again, there's another connection directly from Saturn to Mercury using that Egyptian term rulership. And they're both rulers of the sixth. Okay, let's push on. This is the last point I want to make about his nativity. Prince Harry told Anderson Cooper that his stepmother Camilla, the queen consort, was a villain while his parents were married. And he says that she is dangerous because her relationship with the British press, there was an open willingness on both sides to trade information. Basically, he's saying that his stepmom is out to get him and using information as a weapon, and this kind of, I'm extracting from this the higher level. He has issues with his stepmom, right? She's very problematic in his life. Let's go back to his fourth house of parents, the fourth whole sign house of parents, okay? The sun, in this case, is the trigon lord of all fire signs. Anytime you're born during the day, look to the sun, where it is in the chart. It has implications for all of those fire signs, all right? And the sun is in the Egyptian term of Mars, in an Egyptian term of Mars, all right? And it's ruled by Venus by trigon. So this sun, as representing both all of his parents, but his dad, because the sun represents the father. This sun is ruled by three planets: Mercury by domicile, Venus by triplicity, and Mars by Egyptian terms. And so if we wanted to understand his father, and I think in this case I put Camilla in with his father because Camilla fell in love with Prince Charles. They're connected here. We're led back to the Mars sun mutual reception, because Mars is in Sagittarius, ruled by the Sun by triplicity. The Sun is ruled by Mars by Egyptian term, and they're in this mutual reception. Now, remember, Mars in this chart is not the easiest planet. It's in fiery Sagittarius, which increases the fire of Mars. It's in the challenging 12th house, and it's squaring Mars. So there's a lot of difficult symbolism here. At the same time, there's this mutual reception. And I think what I had here is that the fighting with families, that's shown here. Fighting with his dad, fighting with other family members and parents. And that fighting, that dispute here, that somehow the publishing sector of his chart and then the obstacles are all brought in here. It's information, it's publishing, it's about truth and veracity, which can be Sagittarius. But it describes, without looking at these other forms of rulership, we don't quite understand just how much of an obstacle his dad and the wife of his dad has been in his life. We get this whole other container here, this whole other level of the story. So, the other thing you would say is, when you look at one topic like the 12th house, you can say, well, what about the tools he might have to defend against his enemies? And so in this case, you would look to that Sun, Mercury co-presence, that's very powerful in his 9th, and you would say, okay, Harry can fight his enemies, which in this case are his parents, Mars as the 4th house ruler in the 12th, and his father, because his father is also a ruler of the 4th house and the 12th house, that he can fight them through the publishing and the writing and the disclosures. And that is part of the kind of dance of the challenges with his parents. His tool set will be this kind of writing and religious disclosure. Okay, so this is another example of using these other layers and levels of dignity to understand relationships between planets and how you attach certain placements to the themes that they're engaged with in the natal chart. All right, so that's my talk here. That's the video on Prince Harry and essential dignities in natal astrology. Again, I am S.J. Anderson, astrologer. And you can find me at sjanderson144.com. There's my website. You can look at what I have there, my reading schedule, all of that. And again, I want to thank Nadiya Shah. Thank you for having me here. It's been an honor to make this video for your audience. And take care, everyone. Talk soon.